Hi, my name is Mark Norton, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about jihad, what it is, and the misconceptions about jihad in the West, particularly in America. Jihad is not an unfamiliar phrase to most Americans, as it is seen in the news and has been popularized throughout news articles and a lot of other forms of media. However, jihad is a form of holy war, most commonly used in spreading the word, similar to how Christians are called to spread the word of God to those who have not been reached. They follow the same guidelines. Jihad is seen as this violent and almost like rabid form of a religion. It gives Islam a bad look, seeing as when you hear about jihad and what it is, usually people have a very negative and deeply, almost emotionally charged reaction towards the word. It is seen as a form of war, and war already has a bad connotation with it because when people talk about war, they talk about violence, and they see Islam as this violent and religion that calls to hurt and harm and steal and all these negative bad things, which is actually almost completely false. Um, Islam is rooted in Judaism. Most people actually are. That's new to a lot of people. And it calls for peace, understanding, and accepting of others. Similarly to the Bible, that calls for us to love thy neighbor and um, respect those who are not of the Christian faith. There are, there are two main points that I wanted to talk about today. In order to understand the misconceptions that people have adopted about jihad, we have to first understand what the misconceptions that people think about jihad is. First, the misconception surrounds 9/11. Now, those who committed 9/11, that was a terror group that used jihad as a way to justify their actions. And that didn't sit well with a lot of Americans. And so when a lot of Americans hear the word jihad, they think, oh, the same people who did 9/11 cite jihad as their reasoning for doing it, which makes them think that all Islamist groups or Islam in general is a violent and negative religion that calls for violence, which is completely false. Is actually the opposite, as I stated earlier. But that is a bad example, in my opinion, because the Ku Klux Klan cites Christianity and says that they are a Christian group. Now, that is widely known that is false, and it is unaccepted by those who are Christians. Those who are Christians say that that is just wrong and goes against a lot of views, especially those of the church. Um, it is wrong to say that a lot of groups that use jihad are Islamist groups or groups that are practicing Islam in the correct way. Because, as I stated in the earlier example, the Ku Klux Klan does not use Christianity in the way that is meant to be used. Secondly, that now that Islam is a peaceful and religious religion that calls for peace and respect to others, it is not fair to judge them or that religion by the actions of a small percentage of them that has been widely denounced by the majority of the population of Muslim people. Now, another reason a lot of people look at Islam in a negative light is because of Malcolm X. When he started his almost campaign towards equality during the civil rights movement, he preached violence and for those of African American descent to hate and use violence as their only means towards liberating themselves, in a sense, from what he called the white man. Now, this is negative because when Malcolm X finally changed his ways, he actually preached peace, and one of his best friends to become was a white man. And a lot of people just cannot look past his views as a African American leader that preached violence. This created and still does create that feeling in a lot of Americans that are non-Muslims' mind that Islam is this violent and almost like the way a lot of people think of it is almost barbaric religion that calls for all of these negative and bad doings to those who are non-Muslim. To conclude, I want to talk about the effects that it leaves on those who are Muslim and how it affects them and how they go about their lives as Americans who are Muslim who live in a society that is widely non-Muslim. It almost secludes them from those who are non-Muslim because when people who are non-Muslim and don't understand what jihad is, and when they hear the word, it creates this rift between the two groups. And this rift is wide, and it's very negative and almost it seems daunting to those who are Muslim to try to work themselves into a society that looks almost down upon them, for the small percentage of people that use jihad as a means of justifying their actions. The big impact is just the scale of people that are uneducated and don't know the true practices of jihad in today's modern day. And this is very negative, and my goal is to spread and educate those who don't know about Islam and what jihad truly means, to get them to understand so that they don't judge and make and help narrow this rift and divide between Muslims and non-Muslims. Thank you.